Let's see if my microphone is going to continue working this evening, and I'll get to those questions and answers in just a couple seconds, folks. I wanted to intro tonight a couple topics that I would like to go over, and I'm going to try to limit these to no more than 10 minutes each, so that way we can make sure we get through everything and hopefully still answer any questions that come up. California has approved a new net neutrality bill. We'll talk about that. You know that makes me happy. Apple's iMac Pro VESA mount fail. I'm sure you've probably seen the video by now, but that is a real problem for a very expensive piece of equipment. Xiaomi announces the Mi 8 flagship phone. We're going to talk briefly about the Sony Xperia XZ2, something we don't get to see a whole lot of here in the US. Hopefully you guys that are outside of the country have a little more access to some of these more exotic phones, if you want to call them that. Can you fool the OnePlus 6 unlock with a printed selfie? It looks like maybe, but maybe not. Maybe only under certain circumstances. And 50% of teens in the US today say they're online almost constantly. Only 50%. I really thought that number would be higher. We'll talk about all that right after this. All right, so it looks like I have sound, so that's good. Last week, some weird glitch. I can't understand what happened. I actually had this microphone do something similar very recently, so hopefully it'll stay on. And if not, you guys just shout out to me in the chat so I will know not to keep flapping my lips until it gets going. So Johnny at the top of the questions there asking if we were having any guests tonight. Not this evening. You know that one thing that I do want to do is rotate in guests at least every other week. Hope, maybe weekly, but it all kind of depends, and scheduling is a real issue. So I get a hold of a lot of YouTubers and they are very busy, understandably. So I've got a lot of people who want to come on. It's just a matter of when they're going to be able to make it here. We absolutely have one coming on next Thursday, and I'll be showing you his channel shortly. And I've also got a guest appearance I'll be doing on another channel, so I'll talk about that also. Hello, Carl Letourneau, and we got Johnny Chang, Joshua Fitzpatrick, Playlist Gaza. Hey, how's it going? Nate's Tech Services, and Greg M. And it's a weird thing is I sit here and I see all these people in the chat, and then on my channel it says like there's one watching. So I don't know how that works. Maybe there's some kind of weird delay there. CRTC here in Canada came out with a recommendation for ISPs to assess a levy 4 on their internet customer in order to provide funding for Canadian content creators. Wow. They would also do the same for Netflix. Interesting. And that's another thing that's cool about this. I like that we have people from all over the world here to talk to. Whoa, where'd my camera go? So that we can see, kind of how everyone else does things. There we go. Let's put that back on the screen. So my little disappearing act there. I love to be able to get feedback from international viewers, because we see what we see here, and I'm sure it's the same way in other parts of the world. You see a lot more of what invested interests want you to see, so it's good to hear what's going on elsewhere. Carl, all good. We are here for you. Thank you. I'm glad you guys showed up just for me. I'm flattered that you'll listen to just me talk. Honestly, I really am. So I definitely appreciate you guys showing up. Playlist looking fresh there. Thank you very much. 10 watching. All right, we're going for it tonight. Maybe because we are the Borg. Could be. So I want to open up with this, which you guys know how I feel about it, and I just want to bring this up here on the screen. So I am especially proud to be a Californian today because on Wednesday we passed in the Senate, I want to say it is, for California, a new act which is going to be considered, allegedly, going to be considered the gold standard for bills that in regards to net neutrality. So if you don't know the story, you'd have to go and do some research. I think most of us are kind of aware of it. And I just want to point out here that this is SB 822. It is passed. My understanding is the Senate voted on it here in California. It still has to go to the Assembly. And then we have somewhere between July and August for them to pass or not pass it. And we'll see what happens there. But the important thing to me is that we're seeing an immediate backlash against this move that a lot of large companies made, not in the best interest of the consumers, and they've twisted the languaging around so much that people with the best of intentions don't really understand what this means, and they'll actually argue against net neutrality using points that don't make sense. And we see a lot of that nowadays, where people kind of pick a side and they don't want to really hear what the other side has to say, especially when they're split between left and right, or liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, and to just sign on because someone who represents what they perceive as being their side of the battle without looking into the issue at all. It's disappointing. But the good news is that if you look through this article, the University of Maryland showed that 86% of Americans polled opposed the repeal of net neutrality rules. So we're talking about the vast majority of the population now understanding, being aware of, and saying that this is not something that they want to see go away. We want to keep the internet neutral. We want to have equal access to information no matter where it's coming from. We want a level playing field so that people can compete, people that do things like publish on YouTube channels or make movies for Netflix or whatever it is that they do, whether it's information, streaming video, audio, websites. We should be able to get to that on an equal basis. If you want to tell me that I have to pay for my data according to how much I use, that's fine. But if you want to tell me that I have to pay for my data depending on what I want to access on the internet, that's ridiculous. You start your own service and you start selling it and see if I want to buy it, and that's fine. And if I don't think it's worth the price, if I don't want to pay Netflix $10 a month or $11 a month or whatever it is, I'll stop paying them. But for the people who own the infrastructure that delivers that material to us to say, we're going to pick and choose what you get with your package when you pay, $100 or $200 a month for your internet access, that, has obviously got something wrong with it. So this is encouraging. Also, a number of other states that are, starting things at that level where this really should be a federal issue. It should be a nationwide policy that says, hey, here's how it's going to be. But knowing that the FCC kind of, practically spit in the face of the American public and said, we don't care what you want. We care what the people who are sending money in through the right channels think is best for you. And I certainly hope that whoever got bought off by these big corporations, we know a few of the names, I hope that it was worth their while to be on the wrong side of history, number one. And number two, when this gets switched back over, which I'm fairly confident that it will. I think that we'll see net neutrality reinstated on some level. I wonder, and I really hope that they get to keep that payoff money that they got, or that lobbying, whatever you want to call it, or funding for their campaigns, or however that money got funneled to them. I hope they get to keep it, and I hope the people that get stuck with the bill, I take it back. No, I don't. To be sincere, I hope that they don't. I hope they have to give the money back. But then again, I don't care if it goes to the corporation. It should go back to the public on some level. Anyways, let me get off that. Let's move on to some tech news and see what's going on here. Voice for radio and face for TV, the full package of Harvey. What? So anyways, guys, check this out. This is the flaw, and you may have already heard about this, the flaw in the iMac Pro VESA mount. There's a video on YouTube for a person who purchased or owned an iMac Pro and bought a VESA mount, so you can switch out from, my understanding is you can switch out from the mount that comes with the device and change it over to something else. And long story short, they have this very weak setup where you go in and you change out the screws, and as we have, been frustrated many times about this in the past, where you strip out a screw and it's very difficult to find a good solution to that, especially when you're dealing with these really, really tiny screws. Well, this article kind of explains the reason that this happens, and most of us have an understanding already. The tool steel that you work with should not be softer than the screw itself, because if anything gets damaged, you'd rather it be the screw that's going into the mount than the mount itself, because that way you start chewing up the threads and then the whole, whatever piece of equipment it is that you're working on. If you're installing a screen into an iPhone, it would be much better for the screw to be damaged than for the part that the screw goes into, because once that happens, even if you replace the screw, now it's not going to thread properly. So that makes sense. Supposedly these screws were made out of zinc, which is relatively soft, and they're saying, that Apple could have spent a few pennies more probably on each screw and made them more durable so that they would be easy enough to install and remove. You know, the problem with that, of course, is that if the screw has the same density and the same hardness as what it's being screwed into, then you could damage one or both at the same time. And also, part of this argument says that Apple doesn't actually own this. Well, they sell it. They sell this mount for the iMac, but they don't actually own it. So it's a third party that manufactures this piece of equipment that is sold through Apple. And according to the story, allegedly, when the customer contacted them, they ended up just making things worse. So he dealt with a whole bunch of stuff over the phone and jumped through a lot of hoops, and eventually ended up taking the iMac down to Apple because he could not remove the mount because the screws got damaged. And then they say here that the tech that, or the genius that worked on the device at the Apple Store, actually caused even more problems, made it worse. And eventually he made this information public. He made a YouTube video about it. Somehow that got back to Apple, and my understanding is that they finally gave him an acceptable solution, which is good. But at the same time, you have to assume that this has something to do with a popular YouTube creator, just like we heard about the whole Linus Tech Tips fiasco with his iMac. You know, because someone has a lot of reach, whether it's through YouTube or some other social network, and they get that information out and the company notices because, you know, hey, lots of people are going to see this video that was published. You know, the exception, I guess, would be that if you were a small publisher and your video happened to go viral, then you might get that level of exposure. But for most people, complaining about something like this isn't going to go very far unless they have a platform or unless they find someone else to help them and say, hey, I want to bring this to the public's attention. And we have seen over the last few years how, you know, sometimes you can tweet a complaint and you tag that company that you have a problem with, and they will respond to it because they're concerned about maintaining their reputation with the public. That's not always the case. And when we're dealing with something like this, I want to say that this iMac this guy has is worth about $5,000, you know, so for Apple to say, hey, we're going to actually do something about this, there's a considerable cost to the company. And my thing is, I really question if this was just an everyday consumer off the street who happened to have $5,000 for an iMac Pro and had this same problem, but didn't have the ability to reach the rest of the population on the same scale that this particular YouTuber did. You know, how many times do these problems happen and nothing gets done about it with any company? You know, it doesn't really matter. It could be Apple or anyone else. But if you don't have the voice, if you don't have the potential reach, you know, if you don't have the audience out there to say, hey, I've got a real problem and I'm going to tell 50,000 people, or I'm going to tell 10,000, or I'm going to tell 500, you know, maybe there's someone out there who knows 20 people, you know, and that's as far as it's ever going to get. That's a disappointing thing, because the policy really shouldn't be in place. Whatever that remedy is, shouldn't be in place based on the influence that your customer has. It should really be based on doing what's right for the customer. And this is where we, you know, see in many situations companies happen to fail, and that is unfortunate. And I certainly hope that they do come up with a long-term solution to this. This is kind of an ongoing thing. And again, I don't mean to pick on Apple, but Apple has such a large percentage of market share that it's very likely that we'll see people continue to complain about one thing or another. You know, whether it's an iPhone battery problem, or it's an iMac that they won't fix, or it's a VESA mount or something else like that. You know, there's always going to be something out there, and there's going to be a good chance that Apple has their hand in it because of the number of devices that they have in households these days. So VESA mounts were designed to hang a micro-sized computer case on the back of a monitor. The Apple iMac clearly is not a monitor with all the added weight of a full-blown computer embedded inside it. That was Johnny Chang, and yeah, that makes sense. I'm not super familiar with VESA mounts. You know, anytime I mount something on the wall, I'll typically look at its weight capacity and make sure it's going to withstand an extra 20 pounds, you know, beyond whatever it is that I'm going to install. And with these, though, I'm not sure what kind of options you have in the store, but Apple certainly should not be selling something that is easy to destroy. And another interesting part about this article is that they comment on the MacBook Pro and say that Apple acknowledges, let's see if I can get this to scroll a bit here. Apple acknowledges the single-use nature of the screws used in the MacBook Pro and mandates a screw kit for technicians when a motherboard replacement is performed. Now, I have not worked on a whole lot of MacBooks, so I'm certainly not the expert in this area, but that is news to me. I did not know that Apple planned the MacBook and designed it with one-time use screws. So you take those screws out, you're supposed to put new screws in the next time. That's a good thing to know if you happen to be working on MacBook Pros. We are fortunate, I guess, that phones don't work the same way. Otherwise, we'd be buying a lot of screw kits, and those things suck because they come in a mixed bag, and good luck separating them. Somebody had actually asked me on here how to separate the extra screws, and it might have been you, Harvey, I don't remember, but trying to take the screws that go into an iPhone 7, let's say, and you buy them online, whether it's through eBay or AliExpress or anything like that, and sorting them out, it is a task. They come in a little plastic bag, and the only thing that the only method I really have is take out the pentalobe screws first, take out any of the screws that are easy to identify, that you know exactly where they go, and then try to group everything else by size. I mean, it just takes time. It's a tedious task. It'd be much easier to have a donor phone on hand, pull the screw out of that, obviously, and move it over. So that's my preference, but obviously not always an option. It's way a lot more. Geniuses aren't techs, that is for sure. They are kids working for Apple Store, trying to sell, absolutely. And I certainly don't blame any genius. They are doing what Apple tells them to. They have a job. That's, they chose to work for Apple. Apple is certainly not going to give them too much information. If they did, they'd be tearing people's phones apart and doing the kind of repairs that we do. So that's understandable. It's difficult to scale that type of skill set, I should say. So, not a surprise, but really sad though that this guy had to, was fortunate enough to get Apple's attention and to get them to do something about it, whereas a lot of people probably wouldn't have that same solution available to them. Let's see. Let me go back here and thank you, Harvey. Appreciate that. Does anyone recall what was Facebook doing in India when they subsidized internet for those who cannot afford? Oh, okay. I'm going to leave that one alone, guys, because I'm going to try to stay on topic and not jump around too much. But lots of good commentary and questions there in the chat that I'll have to look through after we finish the stream. Let's see. It could be a support arm, not only a wall. Strange, Louis Rossmann seems to be able to do those same screws without any issue. And that was going to be a question. Hey, John Cassidy, how are you doing? That was going to be my question because, like I said, I don't do MacBooks, really per se at the moment, but it's certainly something that's on my list when I feel that I'm competent to perform those repairs. So I'm curious to know if Rossmann and everyone else who works, I would assume everyone else who works on MacBooks is just reusing the screws. They're probably fine. It might have a lot more to do with your ability to remove them without damage. And we know how tiny these things are. And the thing about this is that selling something to a consumer who we have to assume has not had any technical training when it comes to disassembling and reassembling stuff like this, they're going to be a little more rough probably and not really understand the nuances that go into removing and installing a screw. I mean, I can tell you right now, the first time I broke off a spark plug inside of my engine, I realized right away that I should have done more research and I should have had more hands-on experience before I attempted that task, because after like 50 or 70,000 miles, those things are practically welded in. So my bad, right? But they're selling something in the store at Apple as a solution for hanging up this monitor, which seems like, one, it's probably not designed properly to hold that much weight, and number two, has self-destruct screws. Very bad idea when you're going to be selling that to the general public. So we shall see. With most automotive screws, those soft screws are very easy to remove. Okay, fair enough. Again, there's a remedy, but I think the real answer here is that Apple needs to address that problem. And, if the product isn't easy for your customer to use, then you probably should look for an alternative to offer in the store. Unless you're going to do the installation for them, that would be the logical thing, right? I think. Just my opinion. All right, so check this out. Lenovo Z5. Darn it, my screen is a little small here. Let's see if let's zoom out on this so you guys can see a little bit more of this. The Lenovo Z5 all-screen phone reveal set for June 5th, just a couple days away, so this is pretty cool. I don't know, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't know if we're going to see this in the US. It would be nice if we did. I have my doubts. But this is obviously marketed in China, so the Weibo, I never know how that's pronounced, had announced it, and it will launch on June 5th. It looks like a cool phone. We talked about this briefly last week, I believe it was. And let's see what we have to say here. Without the notch, designers are challenged to find other ways. Yeah, so not a whole lot, really. Just a glimpse here, if you will. And I can't, let's see, if this is a slideshow, maybe we can look at some slides. Okay, so I can't play a video on here, but I think we're okay with the slideshow embedded from a website with attribution. And this is from cnet.com. So this looks like that's the iPhone 10. Well, so you're going to give me a slideshow of something that has nothing to do with the product? That's brilliant. Okay, so they have a slideshow of a bunch of other phones that aren't the Lenovo Z5. So not a whole lot to go with here. And in fact, I feel like I lost the whole page. What just happened there? Let's go back. Ready or not, here it comes when Apple introduced the iPhone 10. Everyone was trying to ignore the notch on the screen. But a whole bunch of Androids followed suit, and that's it. That's all we got. I'm sure there's more to this than that. Maybe not. Maybe we don't know a whole lot. Okay, it's just going back to the same page. There we go. All right, so Lenovo posted a teaser to its Weibo page for its upcoming flagship. The company's VP shared images of the device earlier in May, so maybe we link to those and just check that out because they don't say a whole lot about it here. So, an all-screen phone with no notch or bezels. This looks cool, and of course the big question is, how are they going to do that, and how do I get this stupid little thing off my screen? And the answer is, it appears that they've found a way to embed the front-facing camera behind the screen, as far as we know, unlike the other phone where the camera just pops up out of the top, which I think will present many challenges, especially considering the number of selfie pictures that people take. So this one, though, it looks like seamless edge-to-edge, no bezels, no apparent front-facing camera or sensors, so those have to be embedded underneath the display. But this is a sketch, so we really don't know until we see the real deal, of course. Let's see. They are claiming 4 technological breakthroughs and 18 patented technologies. We would assume that those have something to do with getting probably a fingerprint scanner, a front-facing camera, and maybe facial recognition under the display. So this apparently is going to be kept under wraps until the launch, I would assume, but we can come back and talk about this next week for sure. Let's see. We have a teaser, a different teaser for the Z5. Let's see if this is actually going to show us, claiming that it has a 95% screen-to-body ratio. And what's the teaser below? Is that it? This is what we get to see, part of the screen apparently. So let's see what this other one goes to. We have a different teaser here that I will have to add to the links later on. And this again from the, or is it not going to work? No, it's not going to work. Is that a dead link or is that my ad block? Let's see. And there we go. All right, so now it's showing up and it is not in English. So we'll use good old Google Translate and see if we get anything. No, I don't want notifications. I don't want to sign up for an email list, and I got nothing. I love these. Okay, so not much there besides the launch date, unfortunately. But here's what we do have. We will be seeing Xiaomi announce the Mi 8 flagship phone, Transparent Explorer Edition, and a smaller SE model. Unfortunately, one more phone that we probably won't see here in the US, but it does look kind of cool. However, I want to get your opinion on something towards the end of this. So first of all, the Mi 8 6.21-inch OLED screen from Samsung, wrapping around a fairly large notch that houses a 20 megapixel selfie camera, which makes complete sense to me. I've been wondering for a long time why manufacturers haven't really been concentrating on the, I shouldn't say pixel density, but the quality of front-facing photos is certainly an area that can be improved with a lot of phones. If you turn around and take a picture with the regular camera as opposed to a front-facing camera, you'll definitely see some resolution differences with most brands. And I would venture to say that maybe, if not the majority, a growing percentage of the photos that people take are coming from the front-facing camera. So it makes a lot of sense to have a nice camera on the front, right? So a 20 megapixel front facing selfie camera, that is nuts. It's a little beyond what I expected. Running the Snapdragon 845 processor, of course, and a 12 megapixel dual camera setup. What? Okay, so we have a 20 megapixel selfie camera and a 12 megapixel dual camera setup, presumably on the back, that scores a 105 on DxO Mark. I have no idea what that means. Xiaomi's numbered Mi flagships tend to be extremely good phones. Here's my question. This is the Explorer Edition, and it has a transparent section at the upper rear part of the phone. And in the words of this, the person who wrote this article on The Verge, perhaps most importantly, the Explorer Edition has a transparent back that looks hot as hell. Now, I don't know. I would assume that term, that statement means he likes the way that it looks, right? So I'm not sure about that. What do you guys think about a transparent back on the phone? We've seen this a couple times with Galaxy phones. We've seen iPhone backs that are clear glass that you can see right through, and basically just look at the internals on the phone, which arguably aren't really designed to be aesthetically appealing. You look at them and it's like, that's the inside of my phone. Let's put it back together. In most cases, I know some people kind of like the novelty of having a transparent phone so you can see the components on the inside. Personally, I'm not a big fan, but I'm curious, what do you guys think of this? Is this a positive or a negative for this phone when it comes to selling points? You can see the inside of part of the phone, which maybe you show off your processor and your RAM. I don't know. And it's funny because if you look at this picture, we actually see more of the internals of the phone than we do the branding. So if you're on the phone and you're talking, you're holding it up to your face, or you're texting and people can see the back of it, that's certainly not much of an advertisement for the brand, although it might be a conversation starter, like, what is going on with your phone? I can see it. It's naked. It's got stuff showing from the inside. Well, I want a transparent glass on the back of my car. Yeah, that's a good one. Cell phones, nope. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. You're telling me you never had the transparent covers for your old Nokia phones. I certainly didn't. I don't know if you guys did. Clear back phones give the urge to take the phone apart. Okay, fair enough. That's a good, that's may not be a good thing for some people. How do phones with 13 to 16 megapixel front cameras take worse pictures on the phone, but the back camera will take better pictures? Maybe because the front is closer. That is probably got something to do with it. I would assume that when we look at front-facing cameras, there's a lot more to be taken into consideration because they're so close. It would most likely exaggerate any variances in lighting and other external factors, I would think. Now, I don't know how that works exactly, but yeah, certainly a good question to look into. The Xiaomi Mi 8 is named in honor of Mike. My 8. There you go. Same here. I don't get what the deal is with the notch. Sounds like a horror movie. Yeah, I don't get that one either. Seems that all Android Central ever talks about now is notches. I'm like, I don't care. And the funny thing is, every indication here is that in the near future, and I mean within the next couple of years, it seems as though the technology to do away with the notch completely will be available. And I'm sure that once we switch over to notchless phones, everyone will say how happy they are that the notch is gone. So, I don't know. I don't have much of an opinion on it either way. I'm certainly not a fan of the notch. I would prefer... who was it? I think it was Huawei that came out with the option where you can basically have a notch on your phone, and if you don't want one, you can turn it off. So if it's a big deal for you to have a notch, which, unless you're utilizing that area where the notch is located, what would be the point of having those two little extra spaces on the side where, if it's screen, turn it all on, and if it's not, don't. I don't know. I don't get it. But I guess I thought it was kind of cool that they have the option to turn that off. Enlighten me. What is the big deal with the notch? I know I'm reading the comments backwards here, but I'm curious to see what you guys were talking about. Keeps coming back. No big deal. Yeah, I can live without the notch. Certainly not a fan, but whatever. I've seen worse things on phones before, for sure. The Sony Xperia XZ2. This is not a brand new product launch. But I thought it was interesting that they're writing kind of a review about this. Now, the first thing right out of the gate here is that We don't see a lot of Sony phones, and I want to know why. Because Sony has, look at their market share in other industries. When it comes to gaming, when it comes to producing movies. I mean, they've got their hands in all sorts of different stuff that we see, products that we see in the US, and I'm sure worldwide all the time. But when it comes to phones, their representation here in the US is minimal at best. We're lucky if we ever see Sony phones. I would suspect that this has to do with deals with the carriers. They might have gone in at some point and tried to pitch their product. And it seems like there's a trend more and more towards, let's have a phone store and sell service, regardless of who the carrier is. And let's just try to concentrate on a couple of brands. So when a customer comes in, it's, do you want Apple or do you want Samsung? And maybe you'll have a couple other Androids thrown in there, but not a whole lot of variety. It does make sense because we know that generally speaking, people want choices, but they don't want too many choices. It can become overwhelming. But it's unfortunate that a brand like Sony, who for the most part makes good quality products, doesn't have a lot of market share in the US at least. I'm sure that's different in Europe and Asia, possibly India. But here's the thing. This is an $800 phone, so they're already, and this is what a lot of manufacturers we're seeing now are saying, hey, if everyone else can sell a $1,000 phone, maybe we can sell a phone, kind of up in that price range too. And with Sony selling this at $800, obviously would have a tough time doing that in the US because they don't have the market share to start with. And here's the thing about this. I read into this article a bit. And what we've got, according to Wired.com, an excellent rear camera, waterproof design that repels fingerprints. And it's unfortunate that this term keeps popping up. So I may be wrong here, but I'm fairly confident that this phone is not waterproof. And when we wonder why customers come in and can't understand how their waterproof phone got water on the inside, and we have to do that whole, we have to be the bearers of bad news and say, well, technically, phones aren't really waterproof. They're water resistant, and yet we have a lot of articles. We have so much media out there that represents them as being, impervious to water. And we wonder why people take their phones swimming or throw them in the pool for fun just to dive after, have the kids dive after them and see if they can get to the bottom of the pool. It's not really what they're designed for. So it's unfortunate that we continue to see them represented this way. And the fact that waterproof and water resistant, those two terms have become almost interchangeable. So again, when we, it's the sad part. We have customers come in all the time and say, I can't understand how my waterproof phone got wet on the inside. And we say, well, it's not exactly waterproof. And they say, sure it is. When I bought it, they told me it was waterproof. When I read an article about it, it said it was waterproof. When I watched a video on YouTube, they said it was waterproof. And, at the end of the day, it's not really waterproof. It's water resistant. We have this IP rating system that pretty much confuses the general public. So if you say IP67, IP68, they, well, what does that mean? And it means, well, it's highly resistant to water. Oh, okay, so it's waterproof. It's generally the reaction you're going to get. And if you add on top of that something like a water-resistant phone case, and I don't want to name any brand names, but they're out there, if you add a water-resistant case to your phone, that's great until water gets inside the case, because once it does, it becomes very difficult for that water to get out. And then, it's trapped inside. It finds a portal of entry, but it's very difficult for that water to find its way out the same way it got in. It's generally just going to disperse throughout the phone, and it really can't evaporate at all. So we see that also. People who have waterproof cases that they put their phones inside, jumped inside the pool, didn't realize there was water in there, and corrosion takes place in a matter of days or weeks. They come in and they can't figure out how the phone got wet and why it doesn't work anymore. And there's your answer. So back to the phone. As we might have expected, the powerful Snapdragon 845 processor, a notchless screen, no 3.5 millimeter headset jack, which it looks like we're going to have to get used to. And I refuse to carry any dongles around with me, so I guess it's going to be my Bluetooth headset until it dies, and then I just won't listen to the phone for a while or something. I don't know. They're saying here a mediocre battery life and no secondary rear camera. Apparently that's a thing. I wasn't really sold on the whole idea of the bokeh effect for rear-facing cameras, but I guess that's becoming the new standard, so we'll probably see phones with not only 2, but maybe even 3 cameras, as some of the manufacturers are designing. So this article is saying that statistically, you probably have never owned a Sony phone. I have. I owned one of the first ones, actually. They've dug into the US market with dozens of decent phones all the way back to 2002, but it's never struck gold. I have to agree with that. Also, not always very easy to repair these phones, unfortunately, and it looks like the XZ2 is not doing much better. Too bad, because, oh, and look at this. You can buy them, but only on Amazon and Best Buy. So if you want to walk into a carrier and get hands on the phone and try it out and see if you like it, sorry, you can order it online and I guess return it if you don't like it. So that's unfortunate. And it really seems more and more like these carriers are going to be who decides what phones succeed or fail as far as the US is concerned. So if you've got to deal with AT&T and Verizon, you're in. And if you don't, I guess good luck. So there is talk about a 4-curved edge on the back. Waterproof, again, waterproof, says it right here. So this phone is waterproof, according to the article. Let's see. Gorilla Glass back bows towards the middle, making it one of the thickest high-end phones, which I gotta say, personally has never been a problem, the thickness of the phone, but I guess that's a thing also. It's about 11 millimeters, or roughly as thick as an iPhone 4. That does not seem all that thick. I wish I had an iPhone 4 handy. iPhone 4 is not particularly thick, if I remember correctly. Noticeably fatter than the OnePlus 6 with its case, and is nowhere as slim as the LG G7 and Galaxy S9, but he does not reference those specs. But in any case, sadly, probably not something you're going to get your hands on unless you want to buy it online. I guess the good news is no notch. So we do have a bezel on this phone, if that's a deal breaker for you. Some people do not like the idea of the bezel. Again, personally, I suspect, and I may be wrong on this, but I suspect that if your phone has some sort of bezel that's not actually glass, that's not screen, it may offer you slightly lower odds that you're going to break it when your phone goes face down. There's just that much less to hit, but I guess we'll see. Sony used to be leaders in many consumer electronics. These days, not so much. Yeah, I guess not. That's unfortunate. Only making money with video games, and that is something they appear to be doing well enough, I should say. Any other branch is really neglected or second thought as of recent. Waterproof design is different. Maybe saying waterproof phone is a lie, but the water-resistant design could be the same as a waterproof design. Maybe. But I think the difference there is that you can only call something waterproof, and I could be wrong on this, but I'm fairly certain you can only call something waterproof if it is 100% waterproof, or down to 100 meters or something ridiculous like that. And obviously most of these phones aren't. And the problem in the languaging is that water, IP68, if that means you can put the phone 3 meters underwater or not 3 meters, I'm sorry, you can put the phone 3 feet underwater in a laboratory setting where the water is not flowing, and for 30 minutes you won't have to worry about your phone getting water on the inside. It's a lot different than telling someone you can take your phone to the beach and go surfing with it in your pocket, obviously, right? And especially when you're dealing with salt water, that can be particularly bad. But then again, I've seen people who told me that they take their phone swimming all the time with no problem. So I guess it really depends on how rough you treat it and what the circumstances are exactly. I still just feel like electronics, water, I try to keep those two things separated. Let's see. Why Panasonic doesn't make a rugged smartphone if they are famous from their Toughbook laptops? That's an interesting question, Johnny. And in fact, Panasonic used to make phones, and it seems like it's been a long time since they did. I can't remember. The last Panasonic, I believe, was a portable, but is probably going back to, 2010-ish? I think. I don't know what happened to Panasonic. In general, honestly, you don't see too much of their branding anymore. Let's see. Hulkbuster of a smartphone. There you go. Primary customers are law enforcement and military. I doubt that they want their soldiers with phones. Harvey put something... sorry. Who's talking to Harvey? My bad. Tough books are $2,000, are they? They probably. Oh, that's right. I did see that. Isn't that the one that they shot with a? They actually shot one of those tough books with a bullet, and the bullet went through, but they turned it on and the thing still worked or something like that. I remember seeing an advertisement like that. Crazy. Waterproofing is a nightmare for the technicians when it has to be serviced. And here's my last question on that. When you service a waterproof phone, do you put that adhesive gasket back inside the screen? Because I do that, and I don't think that everyone does. I mean, we know that the phone's not as water resistant. I said waterproof, didn't I? Phone's not as water resistant as before it was taken apart, but I feel an obligation to put something, the closest thing that we possibly can back inside the phone. So, because the customer, if you tell them your screen was broken, your phone's no longer water resistant, a month or two from now, that's going to be long forgotten, would be my guess. So that phone's probably going to get wet at some point, and they're going to wonder why the water got in so easily. At the same time, I got to say, with the frequency that I change phones, this little dude right here is a problem. On any iPhone that has water resistance built into it, try popping your SIM card in and out a couple times, and I'll almost guarantee you that within a few tries, you're going to see that little rubber piece that goes around the SIM card likes to pop outside. And when it does, if you're not paying attention, you put the SIM card back in, your phone is no longer water resistant to the degree it was before you did that, and then you'll find out the hard way. And that's why they put that little water resistant sticker right inside the SIM card tray, or at least used to. But I agree, waterproofing is a nightmare for technicians when it has to be serviced and when you have to put it back together, because putting those gaskets in can be a pain. Hey, look, I'm right on schedule, folks. Hey, where is 1001 noisy cameras? He didn't put up my little markers there today. All right, so you can fool the OnePlus 6 face unlock with a printed selfie. Is that crazy? So we saw that when the iPhone 10, actually I want to go back a little further, when the Galaxy, was it one of the Galaxy phones that first started with Face ID, and someone put a portrait, like a literal picture of someone in front of the Face ID, and they were able to unlock the phone. When the iPhone 10 was launched, we heard about at least one customer in China, I wanted to say, who had to return her phone twice because it was allowing her neighbor, who wasn't even related to her, to use Face ID to unlock the phone. And I'm sure that's not the only instance where that happens. Obviously, if you have a twin, you have a sibling, or a relative that closely resembles you, it wouldn't be impossible for that to happen. So when I saw this headline, and it's slightly misleading, I think, here, yes, you can fool the OnePlus 6's face unlock with a printed selfie, but it's not as easy as you might think. So if you go through the article, what they say is that there was a video posted where someone demonstrated how they were able to unlock the OnePlus 6 using a printed photo, but what they didn't really tell you is that what it required to make that happen is unlikely to occur in any possible scenario that you might encounter. And what they ended up finding out is that you can't just take a picture of yourself, stick it in front of the phone, and it works. He actually had to unlock the phone with his own face first, and then immediately lock the phone, point it back at the portrait, and it seemed as if he sort of curved the photo a little bit, he could get around it and make it work, but it wasn't consistent and it wasn't easy to do, and it wasn't a matter of someone picking up your phone, or let's say stealing your phone and grabbing a photo of you and putting the two together and being able to unlock it. It's more along the lines of you unlock your phone, you lock it, and immediately put a picture right in front of it of you, and sometimes it works. So not as big of a security problem as you might imagine. I think that this title, obviously, it's a little clickbaity, but true enough, they did get the phone to unlock, but it's highly unlikely you're going to be in that situation, right? If someone has your face in front of the phone to unlock it, they certainly don't need a picture of you in order to accomplish that same task. But it was interesting that they were able to get this to work, and it all comes down to the type of technology. As we know, the iPhone 10 has multiple, I don't want to say laser beams. It has sensors that shoot out at your face, and it can tell basically a 3D image of your face. So it knows if part of your face is closer to the camera than another, or to the sensor, whereas with this, apparently, the technology for the OnePlus 6 does not take that into consideration. It's looking more for facial features and not trying to measure true depth is what I was looking for. Not trying to measure the depth from any feature on your face or, 101 points or whatever it was that the iPhone X does. And OnePlus actually responded and said that yes, this is possible. It is not 100% foolproof. We designed, and this is a quote from OnePlus that I got from the Mashable site, we designed Face Unlock around convenience, and while we took corresponding measures to optimize its security, we always recommended use a password PIN fingerprint for security. For this reason, Face Unlock is not enabled for any secure apps such as banking or payments. We're constantly working to improve all of our technology, including Face Unlock. And I suspect that if anyone wanted to try hard enough, they could figure out a way to unlock a OnePlus 6 or an iPhone X using some sort of cast or 3D image or some Hollywood type of deal to bypass that security. But nothing's bulletproof, obviously. So I don't think this is anything to panic over. It's interesting they were able to do it. I don't know what this is about. I certainly can't play this video, but watch. Can this drag queen trick the iPhone X's Face ID? What in the heck is that about? I have no clue. Oh, I guess maybe if you dress up like a drag queen, it doesn't, or it does. I'm not sure about that one. So you don't have to return your OnePlus 6 if you're worried about that. But technically, if you try hard enough, I guess you can find another way to unlock it. And let's see. You can always unlock a Face ID iPhone if the owner's one looked like an emoji. Oh, that's funny. Note 4 was the first Face ID. I think my son could open mine with his face. Oh, that's funny, Nate. So the Note 4. Okay, that sounds about right. I knew it was somewhere around that area. Remember the nano coating? Let's see. Does it help with waterproofing? Okay, so you guys had made some comments here about the waterproofing stuff. Epoxy the entire phone, 100% weatherproof. There you go. Just dip it in some sort of plastic that hardens over time, right? I think that one of the things that we don't really talk about and we might see more of in the future is the problems with phones overheating because of waterproofing. And I suspect that part of the problem with the exploding batteries that Samsung had with the Galaxy Note was not only the insufficient airspace inside the phone, but the fact that the phone is sealed shut. And water resistant means that as the heat is generated inside the phone and it causes things to expand, there's nowhere for that pressure to go. So if the air pressure is increasing on the inside, then we might expect some other problems, I think, over time. Not to mention the fact that any sort of adhesive ages, and when you're dealing in an environment where you go from hot to cold, hot to cold, hot to cold, materials like that tend to break down over time. Now, we obviously realize that most manufacturers plan these phones to live for, a year and a half, so you're probably good for that period of time. But if you go much longer than that and you're going from one extreme temperature to another, or your phone tends to heat up quite a bit while you have multiple processes going on, I suspect that will decrease the integrity of that waterproof gasket on the inside. That's just my theory. So, sorry, I had to go back to that real quick. The amazing thing is face recognition is powerful for surveillance system, but because of the software, a phone will never be able to process algorithm the way a surveillance system will. Interesting. It goes back to Android 4.0. Okay, I bet Face Unlock would be undefeatable if we use our rear to authenticate. No one's rear is the same. Johnny, weren't you talking about using your tongue to authenticate on the fingerprint scanner the other week? I was trying to get my dog to put his paw onto the fingerprint scanner to see if I could get this thing to unlock with the paw print, but he didn't really want to cooperate on that one. So I don't know the answer to that yet, but I suspect that we have the same thing within the animal kingdom, right? You could take your dog's paw print, have him use that for your Touch ID, and I bet there's no two alike in the world, so that would be interesting. A little tough to unlock your phone though, right? At will. 50% of teens, according to a survey on Business Insider, 50% of teens in the US say they're now online almost constantly. And the only thing that surprises me about this is that it's 50% of teens. And of course, who do we blame? The phones. Blame it on the phones. Which, okay, how about this? If you watch too much TV, Who do you blame? The TV? The channels? The broadcasters? I don't know. How about maybe the person sitting in front of the screen? The time teens spend online has gone up significantly since Pew's 2014-2015 study. Back then, only 24% of teens reported being online constantly. I'm not sure how they define that, which means that teen internet usage has nearly doubled in the last 3 to 4 years. I'm not telling you anything you didn't know. I understand that. And obviously, smartphones are going to have a big part in this. My question is, what are the parameter-wise here? What are we talking about? If you're online constantly, what does that mean? Does that mean that you're logged into Snapchat? It certainly can't mean that you're staring at your phone 24/7, right? So I don't know how they define this exactly, and I don't believe that it really says in the article. The survey found that teens spend more time online than ever. In fact, 45% said they use the internet almost constantly. How do you use the internet almost constantly? If that's what it really means, that you're almost constantly staring at your phone and typing things in and reading things, or maybe listening to something or watching a video or whatever, that's pretty crazy. And another big step towards the matrix, because obviously teens are the future. So in 10 years, what they're doing is going to intensify, and the generation that comes after that will probably doing it even more. And try as we may, I don't think that this is something we can stop. So are we heading into the matrix? Are we eventually going to see people plugged in 24/7 interacting in the world from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep with some sort of VR headset or a phone implanted into their head? I don't know. Like, I really can't think of how this could become more invasive and more time consuming than it already is. But we certainly can see that more and more people are doing it. So what that says for physical fitness and a number of other things is kind of crazy, especially when just the other day I was listening to a podcast where, I think it was from the Army, but a recruiter from the military was talking about how difficult it is to find candidates for the special operations branch of the military because they're having a hard time finding people who can pass the physical part of the testing, and that, they attribute to less exercise and more time spent in front of a screen or a phone or whatever it is. And one could argue that, the future is not going to be physical activity for the military. It's going to be pressing buttons and flying drones and sitting in front of a screen. So maybe that's not a terrible thing. But when it comes to health, there's certainly some concerns there. If you're not spending your time being active and getting off the couch or getting out from in front of the phone. So certainly something to be concerned about. I think Pew found that half of teenage girls fall into the group of constant internet users, while 39% of teenage boys said they fell into that group. Hispanic teens also reported higher levels of internet usage, with 54% saying they use the internet on a near constant basis. I don't know why. Again, I'm not sure what their definition of Hispanic is or why that particular demographic would be higher than the average. No idea, and they don't really go into detail on that here, but that is what it is. So let's see. You can use pretty much any. Okay, phone screen on time will give you roughly 3 to 5 hours of screen on time. So how can they be on all day unless they are charging it all day? That I do not know. Maybe they're tethered, plugged in the whole time. When you keep staring at your smartphone, your world view gets as narrow as your display. And I might add to that, Johnny, that if we don't get net neutrality back, your world view will be strongly skewed in favor of what advertisers and ISPs want it to be. And that's the worst thing about it of all. We are going to have a hard time getting people away from their phones and getting away from social media and getting away from getting their news off of Twitter or wherever. But without net neutrality, we're going to start seeing a lot of free services that are selling people products and ideas. And if they have to pay more to see opposing sides, that's when it gets dangerous, in my opinion. If you take the next generation, if you look at teenagers who will be the leaders of tomorrow, and you are able to control the information that they have access to, then that means that big business gets to decide what people think and how they view the world. And to me, these two things combined are particularly dangerous to democracy and to the freedoms that we have in this country, what's left of them right now. So that's a real scary thing. Phones suck. LOL. True. Has anyone watched the movie Surrogates from 2009 starring Bruce Willis? The addiction to technology was pretty much the core of the plot. I don't think I did, but I will have to check that out. Friends, we're running low on time, and I'm going to keep the chat open. I'm going to stay here for a couple more minutes, but I did want to let you know that, next week we are going to be talking to Dave Xiong. I hope that I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and if not, I hope he'll forgive me. He is a publisher, a student, and if you have engineering questions or are interested in high-tech stuff, next Thursday will be the day to bring those topics here. This guy knows things on a level that go far beyond what most of our understanding is when it comes to hardware that goes into the devices that we repair all the time. So I hope that you will all be joining me here again next week. That's at 6 p.m. as usual, Pacific Standard Time. So if you're on the East Coast, that's 9 o'clock at night. So hopefully not too late for anyone. We'll be talking to him. Bring your engineering questions. I am really excited about that. And this Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I will be going to talk to... Oh, you're not going to work for me? Really? Okay, so suddenly my hotkeys don't work. There we go. So I will be doing another tech hangout, but not here. It is going to be on the Mac Square channel. So if you remember, Luke joined us last Thursday for a discussion. He is going to be doing a live stream on his channel. This Saturday, we are going to be talking about predictions for WWDC and all sorts of other tech-related stuff. So I'll invite you guys to come over to his channel and check it out. I will put a link to both of those guys' channels down in the video description as soon as we finish this off. And I am going to hang out here for another 3 minutes and go through the chat, because I usually feel like I just kind of go, okay, that's it, folks, I'll see you later. So I'm going to just be here and see what we're talking about until we take off. And look at that. I wrapped it up with time to spare. And this whole keeping things to a 10-minute interval might actually work out. Let's see. It's creepy. The military is already testing fifth graders for ASVAB. Wow, that is nuts. Fifth graders? I remember taking ASVAB in high school. And that was right around the time that we took another test. I can't remember what it was. There's another test they give you in high school. And I remember thinking, and I, take this for what it's worth, but I didn't feel that the ASVAB was particularly challenging at that point. And having, of course, right afterwards, the recruiters come in and give you results, and they said, oh, well, you scored high in all these different areas, so you could join the military and be anything you want. And then, I immediately said, yeah, but I'm not really planning to join the military. And then, of course, you get, when you're senior year, oh, man, the amount of mail, I would assume email now, that you're going to get for solicitations for college programs that are funded through the military and things like that, which, are great. If you want a military career or you want to get money for college and you're okay with military, certainly lots of benefits there. You can serve your country. It's just crazy how they start marketing to kids that I want to say, like, when they're in their junior year and earlier. Obviously, ASVAB for fifth graders, that is nuts. That could be good for the truth movement. Having ISP trying to control what you see, when enough people realize we have been lied to, there might be a media revolution. I certainly hope so, Nate. It seems like a lot more people are becoming aware of what's going on with that. And the thing is, generally, when you see someone come in and say, hey, don't worry, it's going to be okay. We need your permission to do this, but don't worry, we're not going to do it. Okay, that thing that you're afraid of us doing, we promise we're not going to do it, but we need a law that says that we can. That should make you suspicious, right? But you would assume if they're smart, they won't come in and make these changes immediately. It will be a gradual transition where they add something, take something away, and it will be easy for them to come out and say, see, everything's fine. A month later, things haven't changed. 3 months later, things haven't changed. And then when people start talking about it and it's kind of gone, it just slowly transitions into a state where we go, wait a minute, what happened? And by then it's kind of too late. And my concern also for the future generations are that if you grow up and the status quo is your ISP controls the information that you get and you don't know anything different, where's your motivation to argue or to rebel against that or to start a revolution? It's only when the sweeping changes come all at once that people go, hey, wait a minute, I'm not okay with that. But when it happens slowly, or if that's the way it's been as long as you can remember, you're much less likely to resist anything like that, regardless of what sort of rights it's infringing on, because you just don't know anything different. That's my real concern about that. Let's see. All right, so do the military have an open position for a pacifist? I don't think so. Maybe. Maybe. I do remember that back during a number of military operations we've been involved with, where people who had joined the military for funding for college, and then when they were actually called to go into active service, or to ship out to some area where there was a war going on, they have something called a conscientious objector. And I don't know how that goes over, or if it's an option or anything, but there were people that said, hey, I joined the military to go to college. I did not join the military to fight. So I'm not sure that you can back out of it at that point. I'm certainly not an expert at that on that subject. But you would think that if you sign up and you say, hey, I'm willing to serve my country regardless of what the orders are, and you're going to pay for my college, I would assume that's part of the deal, but I'm not really sure how that works. Control the information and you control many things. Yeah, you control everything, right? That's the deal. Yes, there's even a position where you pick up horse poo. Well, lovely. I wonder how many people are signing up for that one. All right, friends, it has been fun. I'm going to get going. Again, I invite you to join me this Saturday morning, 9:30 a.m. on the Mac Square channel. Otherwise, I'll be back next Monday at 2 p.m. And then, of course, again at 6 p.m. next Thursday, when we will have a real live engineering student. I want to say student. He might even have graduated and is now an official engineer, and I should know that already, but I can't remember. I will certainly talk to him and update that information for next week's Tech Hangout. Thanks for joining me. I will see you next time. I hope you have an awesome rest of the week.